Good morning, everyone. We would like to welcome you to another in a series of webinars designed for departments of transportation. I'm Nadine Hernandez, the Transportation Coordinator here at Esri, and today I'm joined by Nate Reck, who's the Director of Transportation Solutions at GeoDecisions, and by Matthew Long, who is the Transportation Planning Director at Pennsylvania DOT. Today's webinar is focused on how GIS helps the transportation planning process at Pennsylvania DOT. Nate and Matthew will be presenting the PennDOT Connects application, which has created to enhance cooperation between districts, planning partners, and municipalities in their work to identify and address the Commonwealth's most pressing infrastructure needs. Just a few things before we go ahead and get started. This webinar will be recorded, and while everyone will be on mute, there will be some times for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So on your control panel, you'll have access to ask any questions you may have, and then we will try to get to as many of those as we can. So without further ado, Nate and Matt, we'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Great, thank you. And let's see, Nadine, can you make me, there we go, perfect, thank you. So my name is Nate Reck, as Nadine mentioned. I'm here with Matt Long, and we wanted to talk today and really kind of share the experience that has been created here, not just only for PennDOT Connects, which is the heart of what we're going to talk about, but also kind of bookend it with the planning and funding process as a whole, kind of what shortcomings there are, how it's handled, some of the other tools that kind of work in with PennDOT Connects, and then out the other side. So it's more of a comprehensive discussion. So just a little bit of background. PA is the 5th largest road network of state roads in the country. Add on to that 70,000 local miles to the 44,000 state miles, and you got a pretty large network to manage. Over 25,000 bridges, right?
20,000 local, over 32,000 state.
Okay. So split over 67 counties, over 11 districts, and then collaboration and coordination with 23 RPOs, MPOs across the state. PennDOT is a very advanced GIS shop, full Esri stack, but over 40 geospatial enterprise applications and supporting tool sets that are managed and maintained. So pretty sizable program. And just a little bit of background on GeoDecisions. We're one of the 15 platinum partners and one of the handful that are consulting side and not resellers and products. But you can kind of see some things there. Is really my area is focusing on the transportation space, all aspects, but I spent the first 10 years of my 20 on site embedded here at PennDOT with Matt and some others, and have branched out since then. But what we wanted to talk about really is how a system like PennDOT Connects fits into the larger ecosystem. This is really the same for PennDOT as it is GeoDecisions, with creating solutions and providing management of these areas with planning, visualization, analysis through the GIS shop, managing projects, and then maintaining for maintenance. So like I mentioned, a fairly large program that is always changing with new software coming in for some of the legacy asset systems, et cetera. So what we wanted to talk about really here is the funding, planning, and programming process and how those things fit in. So just a couple of topics there that we'll run through. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt to discuss kind of the approach.
All right, thanks, Nate. On behalf of the department, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time today to listen to what it is, some of the great things we're doing here in Pennsylvania, and hopefully to expand the horizons of others, to open the doors, a possibility that you can really leverage what you have on site to inform the public or inform staff that you have in-house. So one of, as Nate mentioned earlier, the bookends I'll start with of this presentation is really what ramped up in the last of my tenure here, the GIS capabilities and enhancements that we're trying to portray. And you can see that on the quote in front of you that we're accountable for more than just, roads and bridges. It's a system. It's not just an asset. We need to move people and good from place to place. So it's about a holistic view of how the Commonwealth approaches what they do. So from the beginning of how we do planning and programming, if you're familiar with it, you do have an HPMS submittal to Federal Highway. That's how we do receive our federal funds. It runs off our legacy asset systems of our roadway management system. Many grant programs, many different executive programs that we have through Federal Highway, as well as other agencies to do environmental mitigation, historical preservation, things of that nature. And then being a larger state, as Nate mentioned, we have a very vast network, both on the state and local level. We do require a more involved appropriations from state legislators to keep, not only try to keep our system in a state of good use, but also to enhance when possible. So we leverage heavy on our state gas tax, as well as bonding, some other local programs, as well as we'll touch on the public-private partnership, which was a piece of legislation that was enacted in 2016, I believe. So as I said, we as a Commonwealth and we create a system that moves people and goods, we're a society of change, and we want that change to be at our fingertips. So we're always looking to keep people informed, as well as get input through the process. So where does GIS fit into really the heart of what we do? Well, as many opportunities as I have had to be a part of, presentations, conferences, organizations, one of the big things people always do is they go to a map and say, well, where do I live? Well, what better tool than GIS to really portray what it is going on around a person from where they live, both for commuter services, for business, for personal, for any other need to rely on the transportation system. So GIS allows us to do all those things in a very spatial, temporal, and interactive environment. So one of the main drivers over the last 10 years, as a decade, was we were able to get legislation to pass Act 89, which was to ramp up over a decade the amount of state funds that became available for transportation-related enhancements or improvements or anything of that nature. So you can see the chart in front of you, where the money was going to be allocated to, how much more money was going to become available. Not only was it a way to enhance our system, but also to revive the economy. We were coming out of a recession back in 2010 from 2008 financial crisis that we knew. So this was a way to not only improve our infrastructure, but to also improve our economy. So one of the tools we used with our executive staff was really to inform the legislators of these are your areas, these are the assets, these are the conditions of your assets, these are the projects that we can bring to not only your area, but your constituents around you to improve your infrastructure. And with the help of GIS and the Esri tools that Nate will talk on later, we were able to visualize that, to bring it more to hit home, so to speak, to really see where boots on the ground were doing work. So one of the ways for us to really educate the public was another use of reports from those spatial applications to inform the public, these are the pieces of state allocation that are going towards projects, as well as funding from the federal level as well, to keep people very well informed that they could intelligently speak to their representatives both at the state and federal level to know these are the funds that are coming to our area. Is there anything more you can do, or be more involved? So it was a way for us to inform the public and keep them abreast as to what was going on. So with that, our current and soon-to-be late secretary enacted PennDOT Connects. It was a revamp of what really PennDOT was doing from its department standpoint for a long time, but we needed to be more involved. You know, it wasn't just the central office staff speaking to the district staff, speaking to the MPO staff. It was everywhere from the county level to the municipal level, any other level of government that piece of asset infrastructure, whether it be a road or bridge, affected them. Because just because that bridge existed in Cumberland County, which is a county here just outside of Harrisburg, capital city, was part of our Harrisburg Area Transportation Study Planning Partner, as well as the Commonwealth. So that one asset affects everyone from different levels of government as well as the department. So how do we gear that up a little bit more? There's a lot of documentation that Federal Highways requires us to produce over the years, such as long-range plans and NEPA environmental clearances to move projects along. So there was a little bit of a disconnect as to what these documents were and what the public perceived them to do from a planning and programming perspective. So that middle cusp in the center was really where PennDOT Connects was us better soliciting, better informing, and better gathering information from locals to move projects through planning and construction. You know, we like to throw always those complicated slides in there to make you think we are smart people sometimes, but this is a very busy, I will say, but simplistic in what it's portraying as the life of a project. It's exactly from conceptual design all the way to construction. Of course, those timelines take more or less time depending on the complexity of a project or its environmental involvement. But this really was the first step to inform people outside of the normal process what it is to bring a project from conception to construction. So with that came also the reflection of what is it that the information we gathered, did it really change the view or the life of a project or the design of a project? So that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to come to an area, understand its needs, and leave the community, not only the infrastructure itself, but the community in a better state than when we were there. So PennDOT Connects was really the way for us to do that and get the information back out to the public. With that, not only from the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, but Connects also allows us to look out further in the future and to better prioritize projects on our 12-year as well as our long-range plan. One of the big aspects of Connects, and Nate will touch on more of the IT side of the mapping models, was to bring NEPA, the environmental clearance process, to the forefront of planning. A lot of times in project budget and scope, you come to where you think you've designed something, and then in Pennsylvania, you always love to come across a box turtle or a new mussel they find in the northeast part of our state, and we need to go back to the drawing board. So really doing all that preemptive work up front allowed us to know what our scope, schedule, and need was, that we can have better cost estimation and the duration of a project moving forward.
So getting into a bit of the construct of what PennDOT Connects is. PennDOT Connects itself, the name, is the larger program set up by the Secretary that included the outreach and all the training and all the policies that went in place. But the PennDOT Connects application itself is a modular designed system that allows for the creation of workflows, dynamic forms, maps, and authentication and security model. That way they all plug together, and PennDOT is able to administer themselves and add new workflows and new forms and change it and maintain it themselves. But it also allowed for a very fluid development process in terms of once the tools were there, then it's more configuration of the system and kind of going through iterations of that. It is based on, the mapping part is based on the Esri platform itself, and I'll get into that. But looking at the workflow philosophy, really looking at building a Visio-like walkthrough, being able to assign them steps and divergent off to other workflows or the type of person that needs to be assigned to those pieces. So it allows for scheduling doing workflows off of other workflows, being able to version as well. So this is big for as the PennDOT Connects program advances, and they may have a new need for some extra data to collect. There is no real data migration. There's no going back and looking at the previous data and having to worry about moving it up to a new data model. The workflow and the forms and the data behind it, all the JSON there is based on version. So you can go back and look at a form from 3 years ago as an example, and it will render what it was 3 years ago, and it will not affect based upon any new changes to the workflow or to the forms itself. So keeps that historical kind of view going on. The forms designer, drag and drop, allows PennDOT to really kind of define what their forms look like, and allowing for the typical things you see in something like a forms designer. If you take, for example, Survey 123 as an example, you can have attachments, you can have pictures of those things. But what we did here, and the reason we went to a more custom model, is that we had a larger need for certain aspects to gather information and tying to other workflows, etc. But it's based off the same theory and really enables, again, version forms, looking at what data you want to provide, if you want to embed a map, if you want to look at collaboration functionality like a chat option on a specific proposal, those kind of things. We'll give you examples of those. And then the authentication part was something that we looked at various options. We looked at like SiteMinder and Active Directory itself, but there was a requirement for PennDOT Connects to go outside of just the DOT workforce from a user perspective. So the planning partners most times really don't have a PennDOT login, even though some do to get to certain things. But we build a system that is really works with LDAP and AD and allows for public logins. We found that like SiteMinder was very limited in what we could do from a group security, application level security that really was needed. And this authentication model, as you can see down the left-hand side, is not just for PennDOT Connects. It runs the entire GIS applications in terms of who can do what and how. So it's a model that is really extensible in that case, and it's used for a lot of different things moving forward too.
So as Nate said, we have the desire to reach outside of our Active Directory and outside of our firewalls and allow for that collaboration, as I spoke earlier, with planning partners, district, local municipalities, people that aren't big users but are big needers of certain types of information in this process. So the ability to do roles such as, we have planners, proposal leads, schedulers, facilitators. These are all steps along that workflow that Nate mentioned earlier of moving a proposal through Connects to gather all that pertinent information about a desired project, its scope, its need, and other information. So aside from not only a proposal and scope and need and other information that would be collected, there is what is called a project initiation form, or PIF, as we at our department love to use acronyms. That really is that outreach to the local municipality of saying, this is our scope and our need for this project. Is there any prudent work around this or within close proximity? And I'll caveat that for a conversation towards the end, that we gather information mobilely in the field as well. So that form is what allows us to gather, collaborate, retain all that information in one central location, that if executive staff or project managers come and ask very prudent questions about a specific project, PennDOT Connects through the workflow designer and the forms designer allow for that quick flexibility of information mining as well. So just some of the different types of questions that we ask along the way, such as zoning, economic, and planning documentation. this is information that at the department we don't really know or don't have the SM subject matter experts to really to gather that information. So through Workflow Designer and the forms and through PDOT allowing us to go outside of our firewall, we can send this information with tasks to people within the municipality or county that have that history and that information and that knowledge to really provide planning level detail pre-design, so that we know where we're going to build and what we're going to build, so we have our scope, time, and budget to the best of our ability. Along with that, we capture information about that asset. This is used in preliminary engineering as well as pre-design to know what is the current asset out there, whether it be a road or a bridge. Maybe we're doing a replacement project and we know we need to go from a 36 width road to a 48 or vice versa. We need to shrink it. Those are the types of information we need to know pre-planning, that we can do scope and schedule and budget to know where this project would fit, whether it would fit within the 4 years of the TIP. Do we need to cash flow it out to the 12-year program? Or, as much of us we don't like to do, keep pushing that project out further because of its scope and need and schedule. So these allow us to better plan for that pre-engineering.
So outside of the forms that we've shown so far, which are the dynamically built ones, and it's really key to kind of hit on the fact that being able to assign a specific section to a user or a role of users to really gather all that local data, which PennDOT really doesn't have access to, is a key part of this whole process. That's the outreach from a technology perspective to gather more data. We pull from the GIS and other external layers from DEP, environmental protection, and conservation of natural resources, and Army Corps of Engineers to get certain data, but the stuff that is not available is asked for via the forms, and it's all notification, email driven, etc. But the heart of the GIS part, which is mainly why we're talking here today, is the key to getting what aspects and what assets are part of the problem statement and the proposal, as they call it, because it's not a project yet. As part of this process is to pick out, okay, if I need to do a redeck of these 5 bridges and I want to group them together as a single proposal, I can go out in the GIS and have access to not only the enterprise data from the bridges and the roadways, but it enables other types of users, be it planning partners or even the PennDOT folks that have access via ArcGIS Online or another organization's ArcGIS Online, to pull in that data as needed. So if there's parcels that are available from the county and they want to see how that relates, they can hit that service and add it in on the fly. So they're not limited to any one specific set. You can also load an existing web map that's in an organization and pull that in, so it's already pre-configured. But the key part is being able to pick the assets and see which ones you're doing your proposal on. So like this example, we have selected here a portion of the different roads that are there and one of the bridges. And looking at the red, which is the selected, it allows you to do kind of point and click from start to end. You can lasso. You can also redline a new road as an option. So if we wanted to do a new center line that is not here, it will store that geometry and use it in the spatial aspect of the analysis. And that's where we get to kind of the environmental scoring piece. This is a big piece of what PennDOT Connects is for, as well as we talked about. You can define a problem and a need, but it may turn out that what you're trying to do is way too expensive or not even feasible. I know there's one project in the state that's probably been talked about for a long time, but it involves like 5 different roads, and it's just very expensive and complicated to do. And I don't know how, it just keeps bubbling to the top kind of. So, but in this example, if we wanted to run the environmental scoring, it'll go out to, I think about 100 layers of GIS data from DEP, Army Corps, and those things, and it'll run calculations spatially to determine a score based upon its location to that asset. So if it's a wetland, or if it's a endangered species, it doesn't tell you what it is. It'll tell you the score accordingly. You can break down that score and see some other things, but one of the things that some of these layers are secure in the sense that we don't want to share that data out, and we really can't because of rules that DEP and DCNR have. But we can at least say we have high quality EV streams, that scores a 10. We're running through a wetland, that's a 10. Depending on how far away it is, it might go down to a 6. And then that whole scoring is rounded up into kind of the aspects per asset. And Matt, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, if there are any environmental people on the phone, please don't think that we are at all replacing the categorical exclusion process for environmental process. This is just for us to know pre-planning and pre-engineering, hey, we might have a 6-month project that's turning into a year-long project because of wetland mitigations or the reach out to PNDI to know what is that natural or endangered natural species that we need to account for within this process. So please don't think that we're at all removing that process. We're just trying to bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, so a lot of that processing and planning can be done up front, and you can do different scenarios for or alternatives per proposal. So if we go back here, we could say that this might be one alternative. It might be the primary, but I'm able to create as many different alternatives as I want and score them separately. So if we decide to take the bridge out of the project, what does that do? If we decide to, instead of widening or whatever, move an intersection, whatever you want to do, if we have if you put in a roundabout, or if you do a alternative center line around an area. So you can have multiple different alternatives that then are stored with the project and scored, but you pick the primary one that you want to say, that's the one I want to move forward with. And as Matt mentioned, this actually feeds the CE, the categorical exclusion process. An output of this goes to that process once it makes it past a certain criterion here that it says, okay, we want to move forward with this. The other ones will sit in here, and maybe they're never finished. Maybe it was just too expensive and too much of a risk, and they're considered forms that were started. They can come back to them in the future, but they sit in this system as record, but they don't move forward in the whole process as it is. As Matt mentioned, part of the process is going out in the field and having meetings with the municipalities that are affected and really gather some information. So the PennDOT Connect system allows for scheduling of meetings. So it will set up basically the ability to do a PIF form out in the field in a disconnected mode. And it'll allow you to gather more information, redline on a disconnected map, etc. But this really sets up the schedule and documents the outreach. And that was a key focus of PennDOT Connects, is not just doing the outreach, but proving that it was there and everybody was accounted for, sign-in sheets, who was talked to, and what types of other projects do you want to put in play. So as I said, for the mobile aspect, it's a developed custom App Studio application that has offline mapping, and it uses the same form renderer that the website does. We reconstructed it into the App Studio world to generate the forms as they are in the main system, because they wanted the same user experience, same questions, same look. So we were able to reproduce that, and you can take them offline. So before you go out to a meeting, some of these municipalities are in very rural areas, and they don't have cell connection. We have a fairly large section of the state that has very poor reception. So they have to take down all the PIFs, and they might go out and do 5 meetings in a day or two to go out and meet with these folks. So they can take them offline, including the maps of what the projects are, but then it also allows them to redline, and it will sync back all those redline geometries and data and parts that are filled out in the field on that application. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just the one part of how the mobile portion is very GIS-centric is, Nate mentioned earlier, that redlining and creating, you see on the left side of the screen, different issues. So if we're there talking to the municipality about a resurfacing project that is a multimodal connector, but the bridge down half mile down the road doesn't have sidewalks, they'll bring that up at the meeting. We'll mark that as a location of interest within a map, save it, and it'll kick back to the users in PennDOT Connects in the office, and they'll know that this is maybe an inclusion in this project or a completely separate one. So that ability to capture needs on the fly with some simple notes and a location on the map has proved to be very, very useful for us.
Yep. So talking about PennDOT OneMap, which is a separate mapping application, but it's really PennDOT's outward-facing GIS portal for data, and how it relates to this topic is it was originally constructed for the planning and programming side to show the TIP, the 12-year plan, the other things, but then it started growing. And then, so it was then kind of grown into a lot of the enterprise data is shared for people out. It uses the same logins that if you're a PennDOT Connects user, you can access the scoring data, which we'll show in here, but it allows them to do a whole lot of GIS functionality and a lot of data rendering and query to do some of these items here. So do you want to describe kind of the
so this would be more towards the other bookend of this presentation of, you know, we started with the policy and the need and the drive to really vamp up what PennDOT was doing from an outreach perspective and a collaboration perspective, which is where the vast expansion of PennDOT Connects, gathering that information, creating your purpose and need, coming up with very good, viable projects for the transportation infrastructure around it. And then when they become projects and they become, you know, shovel ready and through final design and preliminary engineering, PennDOT OneMap is really that view into a project life cycle. It allows people to see what phases have been programmed, what the estimated costs for these are for construction, as well as comparing it against different assets around it, using different spatial functions that exist within OneMap. We find it to be a very, very good tool to do what a normal GIS operator would think is day-to-day, that a non-GIS user finds very useful, such as, okay, do I have a route that exists on the NHS system? It does. Okay, I can talk to my funds management section to say, well, these are the types of funds that we have available. Will this exist on the NHS? So I can use my NHPP funds instead of my STP, because NHPP is a very designated pot of money. So putting GIS in the hands of non-GIS users was really our goal, and a very well-achieved goal with the help of GeoDecisions to do. And we continue to find success. We continue to enhance and grow, and really don't see a ceiling with PennDOT on that.
So to give a kind of background on the technology part of OneMap, it is built upon the Esri platform. So it uses, at the heart of it is the dynamic query layers and the dynamic layers that's part of the JavaScript API and Arc server. But it also allows for access into shared layers within an organization that you have access to from ArcGIS Online or portal here at PennDOT. You can load web maps that are pre-existing as your base and add other dynamic data on top of it from the enterprise or from another location. So it's really a one-stop shop for them in terms of various pieces of functionality. If I want to do spatial queries and joins and other things that normally they would have, in the past, would have had to go into a GIS person at the district or here at central office. A lot of that workload is now offloaded to being able to create reports or tie in the video log as a widget, or their straight line diagram as a widget inside. It's a modular setup that then certain aspects, like any part of this application can then be used within another because it's a JavaScript-based widget. Very similar to, and it follows the Esri widget model in that sense. As Matt was saying, like what kind of funds are available? Well, if I do, or am I going to get into certain scenarios? It's used in the aspect of buffering and kind of analysis into what congressional districts I can fall into. I mean, you can ask any question basically if the data exists and you know how to use it. You can get an answer, but maybe it's not always right because it depends on how you know how to use the data itself. But there's plenty of power users around that can help out. But this is also public facing, so if you have an account, or if you're just, a lot of utility companies use this to look at projects and other things that are out there that are not requiring a login. But if you want to save maps, share maps, do some of the functionality that's in here, you need to request an account. And again, that's very simple to do. It's like any other website. You say, I want an account, and PennDOT will set you up. The scoring maps and the screenings that are within PennDOT Connects, this is the engine that's used to analyze those and look at them compared to other things. It was not added into Connects itself because the same Connects users also used OneMap. So we found it to be efficient to put it in the existing tool set that everybody knew instead of duplicating the functionality. And I think it made it a lot easier that then people can compare it to the other hundreds and hundreds of layers of data that are available. Anything you want to add to that usage?
Just like I iterated earlier, this is the preemptive field scope view that the environmental staff will use before they actually put boots on the ground. They found it to be very useful. Not only that they may know what's there, but then they need to know who to involve in that field scoping meeting to save time and not waste effort.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that the mobile aspect of PennDOT Connects uses the named user and the new user types that are available in the Esri platform. So to go out and use the system and edit data and those things, field users and other types of users are required for that. They do the same thing for their guide rail inspections and those things. But ops dashboards used a lot. This is an example of a guide rail one, but the folks that in the GIS unit, and Matt's probably one of the biggest evangelists of GIS here at the DOT, a power user can create dashboards of the data, share that out through ops dashboard itself as another dissemination model. But to put the final spin on this presentation, when it comes to ways to look at project planning and other things, there's a lot of different aspects of what goes on at a DOT and in different groups, like outside the planning group and into the traffic ops group that's in charge of the TISMO activities and looking at how can we make the network better that might turn into a problem and need. Okay, so using the same tool sets and looking at how to communicate that is really a benefit. So this is an example of looking at the bottlenecks from the RITIS system from the University of Maryland Cat Lab, and really in PennDOT OneMap, again, using all that data to look at potential areas where you can do hard shoulder running, but do we also have to do a project to maybe be able to do that? And I'll let Matt discuss the P3 initiative that was a big success here.
One of the recent public-private partnerships that came along with some legislation that was passed is the use of compressed natural gas for our public transportation system. Public transportation has started to vamp itself up to provide more services to more users in different areas, as well as maybe the possibility of consolidation of services that are no longer useful. So along with the Bureau of Public Transportation, we identified different agencies across the state, as well as we'll call them intermodal connector facilities, that we could build these compressed natural gas facilities and really take advantage of here in the state of Pennsylvania. If you are not aware, we had a vast boom of Marcellus shale in the last 10 years that has really brought a lot of good along with some hardship in our state, but we've always tried to find the advantages to that good. And with compressed natural gas and the identification of good intermodal facilities, the not only economic but environmental improvements that it's made to the agency's fleets across the Commonwealth has really vasted its expansion and its ability to provide good services.
So that really wraps up kind of what we wanted to talk about and give you an idea of what PennDOT has been doing in the planning side, and really show some of the tech behind it that's kind of been a game changer in that world. So
Questions?
yeah, questions.
Two red ones at the bottom.
Yeah. Nadine, do you want to say anything before we jump into questions?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us in today. So we already have a few questions that have come in. So if you have any questions for us, now is the time to get those on over to us. So Matt and Nate, I think there are a few ones already in the queue. Do you see those?
Yeah, we see them.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I see one question, and it says, can you talk about the level of GIS expertise required to use the application that was built?
For the different applications that we talked about today, PennDOT Connects itself, and in most general speaking, the applications themselves don't require a lot of GIS expertise. That was kind of one of the principal designs of these systems, is because we do have such a vast area to cover and a vast infrastructure. We put simple, I'll say, more daily tasks in the hands of non-GIS users with minimal training. We don't just cut them loose by any means. So, but you do not have to have any professional GIS experience to be able to use and leverage the power of any of the applications that we showed you today.
And a lot of the time with the developed applications is also developing comprehensive help and actually doing training in terms of webinars and other things to help some users out. The same technology that's in OneMap is also used by the maintenance group in a sister application that they use to do all their planning and scheduling of maintenance activities. And that's handed out to 1,000 maintenance users, which really haven't used GIS at all. And through some help and training, they have foremen that are out using and creating maps to look at some of their other areas. So it's a very intuitive way of accessing the data easily.
No, that's good to hear. And then did you have anything to add, Matt?
Not for that one. No, I do not.
Okay, and then there is another question here. So for having the GIS layers, have you experienced any troubles with those, or what has been the experience with having those GIS layers, for example, those environmental layers?
Yeah, this actually, when we started, we did find it to be a little bit of a problem, but through some really great use of projections and creating different visual data models along your scalable ranges, we were able to speed it up. Case in point, when you're dealing with wetlands or soils or layers that have rather large, very accurate polygons, when you're looking at a state level, even at a county level, most of the time you don't really get the answer you need. So we would simplify the polygons at a much more vast scale, and then as you drill down to a more specific project area, those polygons would then get to the level of granularity that were needed for use in more survey type of applicable use. So yes, we did have that problem from the beginning, and we found some really great use of GIS cartographic tools and needs, and I'll call them old school tricks of really being able to speed those up. So you can experience it. Obviously, anyone who has been a GIS or a cartographer knows the more you color a map, the busier it gets, the harder it is to use. But through projections and creating scalable data models, we were able to speed up the application very much so, because we did have a complaint at the beginning for that one.
We have done a lot of work in the GIS warehouse side of it too, that runs a lot of this. The Oracle warehouse that's used, like Matt said, we have different levels and scales of the data depending on vertices and other things to generalize them for speed purposes. So a lot of work went into really the GIS enterprise as a whole, not just for PennDOT Connects, but in other applications, including OneMap or VideoLog or any of the ones that are out there for use. A lot of attention was put into the data to be able to help with that speed. And currently PennDOT's upgrading to Oracle 12c, which has made a big difference from 11g in terms of performance.
No, that's good to hear. Everything has been kind of getting those kinks worked out. We have a question here. It says, can you speak on how PennDOT has collected the video log imagery?
We contract that out to Fugro, I believe is the company. They collect our IRI and OPI data, as well as collect the video logs along the way. So that is a contract with a vendor. And
then we process that data, put it into the GIS itself, and then we have the video log player that we saw as a widget there as a standalone application plus an embedded widget that you can run through like a media player.
But for people that don't have the ability or the capability of leveraging something like that, we found users to get great value out of the Google Street View widget that we also use within our applications.
Yeah, we had to pay for, or PennDOT had to pay for a license to use that because Google changed its model, but it was a small expense to give that functionality.
Okay, great. And then another question here, have MPOs used their environmental scoring into their own scoring system to decide what projects to fund?
Yes, us as a department here in Pennsylvania, we have a very great and a very close working relationship with our metropolitan and rural planning organizations across the state. So we bring everyone to the table. We don't try to operate in vacuums. Planning is done holistically with a county, municipality, and the department. And of course, each region has its own desires or needs, and we sit down at the table and figure out what's best overall. But yes, they do use them individually, but holistically as a group in the whole planning and programming process. So there are planning partners, as Nate spoke earlier. Our authentication system allows outside users to use the system, so they leverage this information just the same as the department.
Very nice, very nice. And then one last question here, unless we get a few more in. So can you talk about how long it took to launch this application and what was that experience like?
Well, if you look at it holistically, if you look at PennDOT Connects itself, that project is we're probably what, 2 years in at this point?
Yeah.
PennDOT Connects. We've released versions, we've continually upgrading and adding new pieces to it. So that was a project that started back about two years ago. From a OneMap perspective or any of the other things that we talked about, those have been developed over the years and been revamped. So like we said, PennDOT OneMap used to be called NPMS Maps. That was an older JavaScript Arc server model. Has been changed to what you saw here today to be a web component model, and now it's getting a new facelift into a new, even more modular and better framework here in the coming month. I think we'll have it released here by the end of the year. So that gives an answer in terms of PennDOT Connects itself and the other tools that are used are kind of continually growing.
And PennDOT OneMap has been an ever-evolving application since I've been at the department. It started out as NPMS IQ and then transitioned over into PennDOT OneMap. And that transition was rather seamless given that the technology already really existed with other applications. So as we continue to grow and the needs change, and they said we keep continually enhance these applications. So my staff, really, that's what we do. We listen, we interpret, and we design for our users.
No, this is all very great. So I just wanted to again thank you guys for joining us. And then I did see a few questions regarding about a recording. I will be sending out a recording in about a week, and then we should be able to get these slides available to you on GeoNet. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope you'll join us next year. We'll be announcing the webinar series for DOT soon, so we hope to see you soon. And thank you again.
There's a couple other questions that came in. If we have
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so
the utility question.
yeah, so where does the utility info data come from? In some states, it's interesting to find reliable data. Good question.
It is over the last year, along with our water and power and fiber companies, that is becoming a much more collaborative effort. The department, along with its desire to really have a better grasp of right-of-way along those information lines, utility companies have begun to come to the table a little more willingly. We've found over the years, they like to play that close to the chest for fear of non-survey grade data. But as we continue to work along with them, and they find the value of knowing where PennDOT is going to be milling a road, and they need to put new utility lines down, that those collaborative efforts through such different avenues as highway occupancy permits and other different notification levels that are outside of planning and programming, which we've begun to expand into notifications for those, has really increased our utility information level. We are consumers of that. We do not create utility data, of course, but over the last year, it has really expanded into the collaboration with those utility companies.
And it looks like the last question, how complete is your asset databases? And the tool seems to require high quality data. Has this been a problem? From a perspective of the asset data that's in there in the different systems, PennDOT is a very disparate management in terms of technology shop. SAP is used on the side for maintenance planning. There's a in-house built bridge system. The roadway management system is an old IMDb database, DB2 mainframe interface that is probably 30 years old, that stores all the roadway data. So, and then the other systems, there's plenty to name, from pavement management with Dayton and some other ones. But really what PennDOT and we helping them has been over the last 20 years has been getting that GIS warehouse to be fully populated with as much data as possible from those systems.
We say the expression information rich, data poor. We do have a lot of high quality information that we collect disparately, as Nate mentioned, and GIS really is that hub of that wheel that allows us to reach out all those spokes into those different systems to bring it all together to create a more collective understanding of where, in what condition, and in what timeline we need to program these types of assets.
And I believe that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks again.